How good to have you here tonight. There is something happening right now, in your chest, that you did not ask for. Your lungs are filling and releasing on their own, without a single instruction from you. They have been doing this since the first moment you were born, without interruption, without complaint. And yet, when you choose to breathe slowly and deliberately, something shifts. The tightness eases. The heartbeat settles. The noise in the mind grows quieter. You changed something just by breathing. And the question that sits at the heart of tonight is this: why does that simple act reach so far? Close your eyes and feel the air moving, in and out. Slowly, gently. Your body already knows what your mind has been searching for. Welcome to Sleepy Science Stories. That knowing has always lived in your breath. Let tonight bring it into view. Your lungs begin working at birth and do not stop until death. They take roughly 20,000 breaths a day, more than 700 million breaths across an average human lifetime. That number is almost too large to hold. But breath is not purely automatic machinery. When you are frightened, breath quickens. When you are calm, it deepens. When grief hits suddenly, it catches in the throat before the tears arrive. The body uses the same rhythmic motion to carry oxygen and to carry you, from one emotional state to another. What you are breathing through right now is not just air. The diaphragm is the primary muscle of breathing, a dome-shaped sheet that sits below the lungs and above the stomach. When it contracts, it flattens downward, expanding the chest cavity and pulling air in. When it relaxes, it rises again, pushing air out. It operates without conscious instruction. You have never needed to tell it to work. But unlike the heart, the diaphragm also responds directly to voluntary control. You can make it move deeper, slower, whenever you choose. No other vital organ gives you this much direct access. That access is what tonight's science is built around. Humans breathe in a cycle. Inhalation, a brief pause. Exhalation, another pause. The average resting breath rate for adults is 12 to 20 cycles per minute. Trained meditators, experienced singers, and free divers can bring this down to 4 or 5 cycles per minute through deliberate practice. At that pace, the nervous system registers something different. The body reads slow breath as a signal. The danger has passed. The alertness can ease. You can come down now. This is not metaphor. It is a biochemical and neurological event, occurring in real time, every time you choose to slow down. And it is available in this moment. The nose is not a simple opening. It is lined with a mucous membrane that warms and humidifies incoming air, and lined with tiny hairs called cilia that filter dust, allergens, and bacteria before they reach the lungs. The nasal passages also produce nitric oxide, a molecule that opens blood vessels, supports immune defense, and helps regulate blood pressure. Breathing through the nose delivers chemically different air to the lungs than breathing through the mouth. Air that has been filtered, warmed, humidified, and quietly enriched with a molecule the lungs cannot produce on their own. The nose was designed for this work. It does it with every breath. Oxygen moves from the air sacs in the lungs, called alveoli, into the blood through a process called diffusion. Driven by the difference in concentration across a membrane only 1 cell thick. Each lung contains around 300 million alveoli, giving the lungs a total internal surface area of roughly 700 square feet. If you spread the lining of both lungs flat, it would cover a tennis court. All of that surface is folded inside your chest, working in every second of every hour, without drawing attention to itself, without asking to be noticed. The body keeps its largest miracles in the smallest spaces. It has always worked this way. Carbon dioxide is not simply a waste product to be expelled. It plays a direct role in regulating breathing itself. When CO2 levels in the blood rise, the brainstem sends an urgent signal to breathe. When you breathe too quickly, hyperventilating, you expel CO2 faster than the body produces it, and the blood becomes more alkaline. Blood vessels in the brain constrict. Tingling in the hands begins. The feeling closely resembles anxiety, not because anxiety has arrived, but because the body's chemistry has shifted. Slow breathing restores the balance. The anxiety dissolves not through willpower, but through chemistry. The brain controls breathing through 2 separate pathways. The automatic pathway, located in the brainstem, keeps you breathing during sleep, under anesthesia, and without any conscious thought. The voluntary pathway, located in the motor cortex, lets you hold your breath, sing, speak, sigh on command, and choose the pace of your inhalation. These 2 systems share the same muscles and cooperate so smoothly that most people never notice the handoff happening, hundreds of times a day. What makes breath uniquely powerful is that these pathways can speak to each other. The voluntary can influence the automatic. Every breath involves the entire trunk of the body, not the chest alone. Accessory muscles in the neck, shoulders, and abdomen all participate during deep or labored breathing. Shallow chest breathing, which becomes the habitual pattern under chronic stress, relies almost entirely on the upper chest and these accessory muscles. This pattern signals effort and tension to the nervous system. It is the breath of readiness, of vigilance, of waiting for something to go wrong. Breathing deeply into the belly shifts the effort back to the diaphragm, and the body interprets that shift as ease, as arrival. The lungs are the only internal organs exposed directly to the external environment with every breath. The air inside a healthy lung contains the same oxygen as the air outside, but at a fraction of atmospheric pressure. because the lungs add water vapor and carbon dioxide to what is already there. With every breath, the outside world and the inside of your body exchange molecules. Whatever is in the air around you enters you, and something of you enters the air. You are, in the most literal sense, in constant conversation with your surroundings. That conversation has never stopped. What makes breathing singular among the body's vital functions is the fact that it can be consciously shaped at any moment. The heartbeat cannot be directly slowed by an act of will. Digestion does not respond to intention. The immune system runs without a switch. But the respiratory system listens to whoever is asking, the brainstem or the cortex, whoever sends the last signal. This makes breath the one point where deliberate choice and automatic function share the same muscle. Every slow breath you choose is a voluntary act landing in an involuntary system. That landing changes things. And it is available right now. The autonomic nervous system has two main branches. The sympathetic, which prepares the body for action and perceived threat, and the parasympathetic, which guides recovery, rest, and repair. Both branches are always active, but one tends to dominate depending on what the body is sensing. Under perceived threat, the sympathetic branch accelerates the heart, tightens the muscles, quickens the breath, and prepares the body to fight or flee. When safety is perceived to return, the parasympathetic branch takes the lead. The heart slows, the muscles ease, the breath deepens. The body does not oscillate between these states casually. It responds to evidence. The vagus nerve is the main cable of the parasympathetic nervous system. It runs from the brainstem down through the neck, chest, and abdomen, touching the heart, lungs, stomach, intestines, liver, kidneys, and several other organs along the way. It is the longest nerve in the body. Its name comes from the Latin word for wandering, and it wanders for a reason. It is the body's primary information highway between the brain and nearly everything beneath the head. When this nerve is active and healthy, the whole body knows it. When it is quiet, the whole body knows that too. The vagus nerve carries signals in both directions. Remarkably, about 80% of its fibers are afferent, meaning they carry information from the body to the brain, not the other way around. Your gut, heart, and lungs are constantly sending reports upward. The brain receives these reports and responds to them. Much of what we experience as mood, unease, or emotional tone is the brain's interpretation of the body's current state, and much of that state is being reported by the vagus nerve in real time, right now. The body tells the brain how to feel. Breath is one way to change what the body reports. Heart rate variability, the slight variation in time between heartbeats, is regulated largely by the vagus nerve. A healthy, relaxed nervous system shows high heart rate variability. The heart speeds slightly during inhalation and slows during exhalation. This fluctuation is called respiratory sinus arrhythmia, and it is a sign of a nervous system that is flexible, responsive, and at ease. When the vagus nerve is highly active, heart rate variability increases. When vagal tone is low, under chronic stress or illness, the heart beats more rigidly, with less variation. The heart listens to the lungs, and the variation between beats is the proof. The exhale is more powerful than the inhale when it comes to activating the parasympathetic system. During exhalation, the diaphragm rises, the chest compresses slightly, and the heart rate slows in a measurable and consistent way. A long exhale, longer than the inhale, directly stimulates the vagus nerve and increases its activity. Breath practices across cultures and centuries have specifically emphasized the out-breath for this reason. The in-breath brings resources. The out-breath is where the body settles, where something held all day is quietly given back. Slow breathing at around 5 to 6 breaths per minute, a rhythm called resonance frequency breathing in clinical research, appears to synchronize heart rate variability, blood pressure oscillations, and brain activity into a coherent and measurable pattern. This rhythm has been studied in connection with reduced symptoms of anxiety, improved heart function, and lower markers of physiological stress. It is not a complex practice. It is simply breathing slower than the body would choose on its own, given the habits stress has set. The body rewards this choice with a shift that can be felt within minutes and measured within seconds. The amygdala is the brain region most associated with the detection of threat. It operates quickly, often triggering a fear response before the conscious mind has fully processed what it encountered. Under chronic anxiety, the amygdala becomes more reactive. Hair trigger, alert to patterns that resemble past danger even when no danger is present. But the amygdala also receives input from the vagus nerve. When vagal tone is high, when the parasympathetic system is active, amygdala reactivity decreases. The body and the alarm system are not separate entities. They speak to each other, and breath speaks to both simultaneously. The insula is a region of the brain that integrates signals from inside the body, a process researchers call interoception. It monitors heart rate, breathing patterns, digestion, temperature, and dozens of other internal states at once. The insula's ongoing activity shapes what you feel as mood, anxiety, and emotional tone. When the breath is shallow and rapid, the insula registers a body in distress and contributes to an overall sense of unease. When the breath is slow and full, the insula registers a body at rest. Feelings, to a significant degree, are interpretations of internal signals, and breath shapes those signals directly. The prefrontal cortex, the region associated with planning, reasoning, decision-making, and emotional regulation, is connected to the body's stress systems through multiple pathways. under high stress, these connections are effectively overridden by the amygdala's more urgent signals. Reasoned thought grows distant. The alarm takes priority. But intentional slow breathing appears to begin restoring prefrontal access, gradually returning influence to the part of the mind that can weigh, consider, and choose. Studies using neuroimaging suggest that breath-focused practices increase prefrontal activity while decreasing amygdala output. The thinking mind is not lost in anxiety. It has been temporarily outranked. Slow breath shifts the ranking back. Panic attacks involve a rapid escalation of physical symptoms: racing heart, tightening chest, difficulty breathing, that are interpreted by the mind as catastrophic danger. Research into panic disorder has found that hyperventilation plays a central role. Rapid breathing drops CO2 levels, causing vasoconstriction, tingling, and lightheadedness, which then amplifies the sense of threat. Slow, controlled breathing interrupts this cycle not by willpower alone, but by changing the chemistry of the blood in a way the nervous system can read. The body's alarm system cannot sustain its highest pitch in the presence of adequate CO2. The chemistry shifts, and the alarm follows. The breath has been used as a focal point in meditative and contemplative traditions across many cultures for thousands of years. In Buddhist vipassana, in yogic pranayama, in Taoist cultivation practices, and in indigenous ritual across every continent, the breath has been identified as the one constant anchor, the thing that is always present, always accessible, and always responsive. Modern research has only recently begun to explain in physiological terms what these traditions appear to have discovered through sustained observation. That the breath is a lever, and that intentional use of it changes the state of the entire system. Clinical research has examined slow, paced breathing in populations with anxiety, post-traumatic stress, cardiac disease, and depression across dozens of studies and multiple countries. What emerges is not a single dramatic finding but a consistent pattern. Physiological markers of stress fall, inflammatory signals shift, and self-reported calm increases even in people who arrived deeply skeptical. The effect is not dependent on the label used or the tradition it comes from. What matters is the rhythm, the slowing itself. The biology does not require a framework, a belief system, or a particular posture. It requires only the pace and the willingness to hold it. The nose and mouth are not interchangeable for breathing. Nasal breathing produces nitric oxide, which mouth breathing does not. Nasal breathing filters air more effectively and warms it before it reaches the lungs. Some research suggests that nasal breathing, particularly through the left nostril, may slightly increase parasympathetic activity compared to mouth breathing, though findings in this specific area vary across studies. What is consistent is this: the nose was designed for breathing, the mouth for eating and speaking. Using each as intended is itself a small and largely overlooked form of daily care for the nervous system. The breath affects the brain's electrical activity in measurable ways. During slow, deep breathing, EEG, studies show increases in alpha and theta wave activity, the brain states associated with relaxed alertness and early-stage sleep, respectively. These are the same brain states associated with meditation, light trance, and the hypnagogic period just before sleep begins. The breath does not merely follow the brain state. In a measurable and reproducible sense, it helps produce it. The pathway runs in both directions. Brain to breath, and breath to brain. The body is always in conversation with itself, and breath is one of the most legible parts of that language. What the science of breathing reveals, fact by fact, is a system of profound responsiveness. The lungs, the diaphragm, the vagus nerve, the brainstem, the heart, the amygdala, the prefrontal cortex. They are not isolated parts operating in parallel. They are a conversation, ongoing, in every moment. And somewhere in the middle of that conversation sits your breath, voluntary, available, and already present. Every slow exhale is a sentence in that conversation. The body has been listening for it all along. This entire hour is you learning to speak it clearly, for the first time in a long time. Take a moment here and notice what is happening in your chest right now. The air moving in and out of your lungs is already doing something. That something has a name. You have already heard that the vagus nerve listens, that the amygdala quiets, that the blood chemistry shifts. You have not yet heard all of it. But something in your body is already receiving the message of tonight. Let the exhale be a little longer than the inhale. Not by effort. Just by not rushing to breathe in. The science continues from here, moving closer to where the answer lives. The diaphragm and the psoas muscle are connected through a shared fascial web. The psoas, one of the deepest muscles in the body, runs from the lumbar spine to the femur and is sometimes called the muscle of the soul in body-centered therapy traditions, because it contracts in response to fear, curling the body inward in protection. When the diaphragm cannot move fully due to shallow breathing, the psoas is often chronically shortened as well. Full diaphragmatic breathing does not only expand the lungs, it gently lengthens some of the deepest postural muscles in the body and releases a holding the body has been doing without announcing it. Sighing is a biological reset mechanism, not merely a sign of exhaustion or sadness. Humans sigh roughly once every 5 minutes on average, even during sleep. Each sigh involves a double inhale, a brief second inhalation immediately following the first, which reinflates collapsed alveoli that have closed due to shallow breathing. Without sighing, the alveoli gradually deflate and gas exchange becomes less efficient. The spontaneous sigh is the body's own maintenance protocol for the lungs. It also produces a brief but measurable increase in heart rate variability. Every time you sigh without meaning to, the body is quietly repairing itself, the polyvagal theory, developed by neuroscientist Stephen Porges in the 1990s, proposed that the vagus nerve has two functional pathways: a more evolutionarily ancient branch that responds to extreme threat with shutdown and collapse, and a newer branch that supports social engagement, calm, and connection. Porges suggested that breath, particularly the extended exhale, activates the newer social branch. This framework has shaped therapeutic work with trauma. Some aspects of the theory remain areas of active scientific debate, but the core insight, that breath modulates vagal tone and thereby influences social and emotional states, has independent experimental support. Humming and chanting activate the vagus nerve through vibration in the vocal cords and pharynx. Studies examining heart rate variability during humming or sustained vocalization have found increases in vagal tone and reductions in markers of physiological stress. The vagus nerve passes through the larynx and pharynx on its path from brainstem to chest. Sound made on the exhale vibrates directly against it. This is one reason why chanting has appeared in meditative contexts across the world for thousands of years. From Tibetan monasteries to Gregorian choirs to the humming of a parent settling a child. The vibration is not symbolic. It is physical contact with the nervous system. Cold water applied to the face activates the diving reflex, a suite of physiological responses that slows the heart rate and redistributes blood toward the core organs. This reflex is mediated by the vagus nerve and evolved in marine mammals as a survival mechanism during deep dives. The heart rate can fall by 10 to 25% within seconds of cold water contact with the face. Slow breathing and cold exposure share a common vagal pathway. The body's relaxation system is not fragile or difficult to reach. It responds reliably to signals it has known how to read for millions of years. The breath and heart rate are coupled in a way that serves the lungs directly. During inhalation, the heart speeds slightly to move more blood through for oxygenation. During exhalation, it slows, reducing unnecessary work. This variation, the heart accelerating and decelerating in sync with the breath, enhances how efficiently oxygen transfers from the alveoli into the blood. A heart beating at a perfectly rigid, unchanging rate would actually move blood less efficiently. Flexibility is not a luxury in cardiac function. The body uses it to breathe better. Variation is the mechanism, and the breath sets the tempo. Breathing pattern disorders are more common than is widely recognized in clinical medicine. Habitual shallow chest breathing, mouth breathing, frequent sighing, or chronic overbreathing can develop in response to prolonged stress and can become self-perpetuating cycles. The nervous system adapts to the pattern over time. A body that habitually breathes rapidly calibrates its carbon dioxide thresholds lower, making it more likely to experience physical symptoms of anxiety from even normal CO2 fluctuations. Breathing retraining, slowing the rate, deepening the movement, shifting from mouth to nasal breathing, can recalibrate this threshold over weeks and months of consistent practice. The gut is sometimes called the second brain because it contains more than 100 million neurons, as many as are found in the entire spinal cord, and produces neurotransmitters including serotonin, dopamine, and GABA. Approximately 90% of the body's serotonin is made in the gut, not in the brain. The vagus nerve connects brain and gut in both directions. The brain influences digestion, and the gut reports its state continuously upward. Slow breathing increases vagal tone, which improves the quality of this bidirectional communication. The feeling of anxiety concentrated in the stomach is not incidental to emotional states. It is one of the ways the gut-brain axis works exactly as designed. The phrenic nerve runs from the third, fourth, and fifth cervical vertebrae down through the chest to reach the diaphragm, which it controls. Without this nerve signal, the diaphragm cannot contract. It is one of the body's most essential communication lines, and also one of the more resilient peripheral nerves, capable of significant regeneration over long distances given the right conditions. The same nerve that makes every breath possible is one the body works hard to protect, when needed, to repair. The infrastructure of breathing is more robust than most people ever need to know. Under acute stress, a confrontation, a medical emergency, a performance, the body's default is to breathe faster. Box breathing interrupts this default by imposing equal counts of inhale, hold, exhale, and hold, typically 4 seconds each. This brings the breath rate to roughly 4 cycles per minute, within the range associated with vagal activation. The brief holds slightly elevate blood CO2, counteracting the hyperventilation tendency. Emergency physicians, surgeons, and firefighters have adopted it not because it sounds calming, but because it produces measurable retention of fine motor control under pressure. The technique was built for when calm cannot be assumed. Breathing influences brain activity, not only chemically, but through its direct effect on brain oscillations. The olfactory bulb, the brain region that processes smell, is directly connected to the hippocampus and amygdala, and it synchronizes with the nasal breath cycle. Research from Northwestern University, published in 2016, found that the rhythm of nasal breathing modulates electrical oscillations in the olfactory cortex and hippocampus. Memory retrieval and fear response were both found to vary depending on whether a stimulus was encountered during inhalation or exhalation. The nose rights experience differently depending on which half of the breath cycle you are in when something happens. Sleep apnea, the repeated interruption of breathing during sleep, affects an estimated 1 billion people worldwide, with the majority undiagnosed. During apneic episodes, oxygen levels fall, carbon dioxide rises, and the body triggers brief arousals, often without reaching full consciousness, to restore breathing. These arousals fragment sleep architecture across the night. The resulting sleep, though adequate in duration, is significantly reduced in quality, with downstream effects on mood, cognitive function, and cardiovascular health. The body cannot fully give itself to rest while it is simultaneously fighting to breathe. These are needs that cannot coexist. Breath hold diving, or free diving, requires the nervous system to suppress the urge to breathe far beyond its ordinary limits through a combination of training, physiology, and deep calm. The world record for a static breath hold underwater is 24 minutes and 37 seconds, set by Budimir Shobat in 2021. Trained free divers can hold the breath for over 10 minutes without pre-oxygenation by slowing their metabolic rate through full-body relaxation. The less agitated the system, the lower its oxygen demand, and the longer it can survive on what it already has. The science of free diving is, in part, a science of learning to need less by becoming more still. Emotional memory may be encoded differently depending on the breath state during the moment of encoding. Research suggests that inhaling through the nose during a fear conditioning event produces stronger fear memory than exhaling. Recall of neutral memories has also been found to be faster during inhalation in some experimental conditions. These effects diminish when breathing is through the mouth, suggesting that nasal airflow specifically is the relevant variable. The breath cycle may be one of the mechanisms through which the emotional coloring of memory is set. What you were breathing when something happened may be quietly threaded into how you remember it. At the midpoint of the fact sequence, the picture emerging is this: breath is not incidental to mental life. It is integral to it. The chemistry of the blood, the rhythm of the heart, the tone of the vagus nerve, the reactivity of the amygdala, the state of the gut, the encoding of memory. All of these shift with the pattern of breathing. Every anxious breath trains the body toward anxiety. Every slow, deliberate exhale trains it in a different direction. The question is not whether this is true. The question has become how long the body has been waiting for you to know it and use it. Something is settling in you right now. That is not accidental. The same system tonight's science describes is already responding to the hour you have spent here. The breath influences pain perception through multiple physiological mechanisms. Slow diaphragmatic breathing has been found to increase pain tolerance in laboratory settings, an effect attributed partly to endorphin release and partly to parasympathetic activation, which dampens the nervous system's threat scanning mode. Under sympathetic dominance, pain signals are amplified. Under parasympathetic activation, pain processing is modulated. Breath-based techniques have been incorporated into pain management protocols for childbirth, dental procedures, chronic pain, and post-surgical recovery. The breath does not eliminate pain, but it changes the nervous system's relationship to it. The respiratory system plays a role in the body's pH regulation. Carbon dioxide in the blood combines with water to form carbonic acid. When CO2 rises, blood becomes more acidic. When CO2 falls, it becomes more alkaline. The kidneys also regulate blood pH, but over a time frame of hours or days. The lungs can shift blood pH within seconds through changes in breathing rate. This speed makes the respiratory system the body's fastest chemical regulator. It also means that deliberately slowing the breath changes the body's internal chemistry almost immediately, faster than most people expect. Fear and breath run a loop. The amygdala triggers a fear response within milliseconds of perceiving threat, quickening the breath before conscious awareness has caught up. But the loop is not one-directional. The amygdala also receives continuous input from the vagus nerve, and vagal activity is directly raised by slow breathing. When breath slows, vagal tone rises, amygdala output decreases, and the perceived intensity of threat drops. The loop runs in both directions with equal reliability. What this means in practice is that you can enter the loop from the breath side, not just the fear side, and change where it ends. Laughter involves a series of rapid, forced exhalations, short, repeated bursts of air, followed by a large inhalation. This pattern temporarily disrupts normal breathing rhythm, but in its aftermath, the body often settles into a slower, deeper pattern. Heart rate variability increases following genuine laughter in ways that resemble the effects of slow breathing practice. Some researchers have described laughter as a form of involuntary respiratory training, a way the body periodically resets through social behavior what stress has tightened. Breath and expression have always been tangled. Laughter is the body's own version of the long exhale. The relationship between breath and voice is more intimate than most people consider. The voice is produced by air from the lungs moving past the vocal cords, which vibrate to produce sound. Breath support, the controlled release of air from the diaphragm, is the foundation of all trained vocal production. Singing, acting, and public speaking all depend on it. A person speaking on the last dregs of their breath, without refueling from the diaphragm, produces a voice that sounds thin and effortful. The nervous system reads voice quality as information about state. Breath creates the voice, and the voice carries the nervous system's current report to everyone listening. Yawning is not well understood despite centuries of observation. Common explanations: that it equalizes pressure, signals boredom, or relieves fatigue, have not been consistently supported by experiment. One active hypothesis holds that yawning cools the brain. The large intake of cool air may lower temperature in the carotid blood supply. Another is that susceptibility to contagious yawning is associated with social bonding and empathy. The more attuned you are to others, the more likely their yawn crosses into you. The yawn may be one of the ways a body that wants to rest reaches toward the bodies around it. Breath-synchronized movement, as practiced in yoga, Tai Chi, and certain forms of therapeutic dance, amplifies the physiological effects of slow breathing by coupling the breath with proprioception, balance, and gentle physical exertion. Research on yoga has found reductions in cortisol, blood pressure, and self-reported anxiety following regular practice. Neuroimaging studies have found measurable changes in gray matter density in regions associated with interoception after sustained yoga practice. The body learns structurally from what is done with it over time. Breath paired with conscious movement may deepen the learning faster than either practice alone. The limbic system. The network, including the amygdala, hippocampus, hypothalamus, and cingulate cortex, is more directly connected to the brainstem breathing center than most cortical areas. These structures all have connections to the parabrachial nucleus, which relays respiratory and vagal information upward. Emotion and breath are not metaphorically linked. They are anatomically wired together in the brain's architecture. The sensation of anxiety in the chest is not imagined or exaggerated. It lives in the literal neural circuitry that connects how you breathe to how you feel, in every moment. The relationship between anxiety and breath is bidirectional and self-reinforcing. Anxiety alters breathing, producing shallow, rapid chest breathing that perpetuates physiological stress. But breathing can also alter anxiety, producing changes in vagal tone, amygdala activity, and blood chemistry that reduce the experience of stress. Randomized controlled trials examining breath-based interventions in clinical anxiety have found consistent, though modest, reductions in anxiety symptoms across multiple populations. The body does not require a perfect protocol. It does not require complete belief. It requires a direction, and slow breath provides one. At this point in the journey, something can be named that was only hinted at before. Every anxious breath is not a failure of will. It is the body doing exactly what it was built to do, matching its physiology to its perceived environment. When the world feels unsafe, the body breathes as if it needs to run. What slow breathing does is not override this response. It changes the report the body is receiving. It is the body receiving new evidence and updating its conclusion. You are not forcing calm. You are providing the nervous system with information it has been waiting to receive. The tightness you may have brought with you tonight, the holding that lives around the sternum, or the throat, or the upper chest, that tension is not a problem to solve right now. The facts that follow will describe what happens in the body when anxiety persists. They will name systems you cannot see but can influence. For now, let the exhale go a little longer than the inhale. Not by effort, just by letting the out-breath finish before the next in-breath begins. The body will do everything else. It has always known how to do the rest. That is what tonight has been saying. The anterior cingulate cortex, a region involved in conflict monitoring, attention, and emotion regulation, shows measurable changes in activity during breath-focused attention tasks. In studies using functional fMRI, participants who focused on their breath showed increased activation in this region and decreased activation in the default mode network, the brain network associated with mind-wandering and self-referential rumination. Focusing attention on the breath does not just feel calming. It changes which neural networks are active, measurably reducing the brain processes most associated with anxious thought loops. Interoception, The perception of the body's internal states is a trainable skill, not a fixed capacity. People who have difficulty detecting their own heartbeat tend to show poorer emotional regulation in laboratory tasks. Conversely, individuals with higher interoceptive accuracy show greater capacity to modulate their own emotional responses. Breath awareness may function as a form of interoceptive training. By repeatedly returning attention to the sensations of breathing, the practitioner develops greater access to the body's own reporting systems. Over time, you learn to read yourself earlier, when the signals are still quiet. Respiratory sinus arrhythmia, the rise and fall of heart rate across the breath cycle, diminishes with chronic stress and with age, when stress is the dominant pattern. Children show large, pronounced respiratory sinus arrhythmia. Under sustained stress, this variation flattens, and the heart becomes less responsive to the breath. Practices that restore resonance, frequency breathing, slow, regular breathing at around 5 cycles per minute, may partially recover this responsiveness over time. The body can relearn what it knew before anxiety made it forget, given enough consistent practice and enough safe moments. There are 2 types of mechanoreceptors in the lungs that communicate directly with the brainstem. Slowly adapting receptors respond to sustained lung inflation and appear to contribute to the post-inspiration pause, the still moment between the full inhalation and the next outbreath. Rapidly adapting receptors respond to sudden changes in airway pressure. Both types are communicating continuously upward. What this physiology describes is a breath that is more than a mechanical event. The pause between breaths carries physiological weight. The brainstem receives it. The system responds. Stillness has a function. Breathing patterns shift before anxiety is consciously recognized. Studies using continuous respiratory monitoring have found that individuals about to enter a stressful situation increase their breathing rate before any subjective report of anxiety has been registered. The body shifts before the mind knows it has shifted. This suggests that breath changes are early physiological signals in the stress response, preceding conscious awareness. Breath may be one of the first legible signs that the nervous system is changing state, and therefore one of the earliest points where an intervention can be effective. Extended exhale breathing has been explored as a complementary approach in cardiac rehabilitation, hypertension management, and treatment of post-traumatic stress. In each of these clinical contexts, the mechanism is the same. Vagal stimulation reduces sympathetic tone and produces measurable changes in heart rate, blood pressure, and cortisol. While breath practice is not a replacement for medical treatment in any of these conditions, it has been recognized in clinical guidelines in several countries as a useful adjunct. The body's relaxation pathway is not selective. When activated through breath, it benefits every system simultaneously. Nasal breathing during sleep is associated with better quality sleep and fewer arousals than mouth breathing. Mouth breathing correlates with higher rates of snoring, increased upper airway resistance, and altered sleep architecture. Children who habitually breathe through the mouth show higher rates of sleep-disordered breathing and, in some studies, behavioral changes consistent with chronic sleep disruption. The position of the mouth during sleep has consequences that extend well beyond the night they occur in. What the body does while unconscious is shaped, in part, by habits formed while conscious. The heart has its own intrinsic nervous system, sometimes called the little brain of the heart, containing approximately 40,000 neurons. These neurons process information and respond to physiological changes independently of the brain. They receive input from the vagus nerve, the sympathetic system, and the heart's own sensory receptors, integrating this information and influencing the heart's own behavior. The heart is not a pump operated by remote control. It is a semi-autonomous processing center participating in its own regulation, in ongoing dialogue with the brainstem and the lungs, all day, all night. Chronic activation of the sympathetic nervous system, called allostatic overload in stress research, has been associated with elevated inflammatory markers, shortened telomeres as measured in cellular aging studies, and increased risk of cardiovascular and metabolic disease. The parasympathetic system appears to play an anti-inflammatory role. Vagal activation reduces the release of pro-inflammatory signaling molecules. Breathing slowly is not merely calming in a subjective sense. Evidence suggests it has effects at the cellular level, measurable changes in the body's long-term chemistry from what initially appears to be a simple act. Tibetan Tummo practice involves controlled breath retention combined with visualization and focused attention. Research by Herbert Benson at Harvard Medical School in the early 1980s documented measurable increases in peripheral skin temperature in experienced practitioners during the practice. While the mechanisms are not fully understood and the samples studied were small, the findings have been replicated in modified form by subsequent researchers. The practice demonstrates that certain physiological processes, typically outside conscious reach, can be approached through sustained discipline of breath and attention. The body responds to sustained practice in ways that vary between individuals. The work of a breath is measurable in energy terms. At rest, the human respiratory system consumes roughly 1 to 3% of the body's total energy. During moderate exercise, this rises to 8 to 10%. During maximal exertion, the respiratory muscles can claim as much as 15% of total oxygen consumption, competing with the working muscles for the very resource they exist to supply. Efficient breathing, which is full and slow and coordinated, costs less than shallow and effortful breathing. Ease in the breath is not a feeling. It is a measurable fact of physiology. Anxiety disrupts sleep, partly through its effects on breathing and autonomic tone. Elevated sympathetic tone at bedtime is associated with both difficulty falling asleep and difficulty staying asleep. It produces lighter sleep stages, more frequent nighttime arousals, and reduced time in slow-wave sleep, the most physically restorative phase. The body and mind cannot descend fully into rest when the alarm is still ringing. Breath-based relaxation practiced in the window before sleep has been found in some studies to reduce the time it takes to fall asleep and to improve subjective sleep quality. The breath that calms the day can prepare the night. The nose follows a natural cycle of alternating dominance between nostrils, approximately every 2 to 4 hours, called the nasal cycle. During one phase, the left nostril is more open. During another, the right. Yogic traditions describe the left nostril as associated with calming effects and the right with alerting effects, corresponding roughly to parasympathetic and sympathetic activation. Some modern research has found evidence for lateralized effects of nasal breathing on autonomic balance, though findings are not consistent across all studies. The body's nasal cycle may serve a regulatory oscillation. It performs continuously, without instruction or awareness. The diaphragm sits at the anatomical boundary between the thoracic and abdominal cavities, and its movement massages the organs below: the stomach, liver, spleen, and intestines, with every breath. Full diaphragmatic breathing also stimulates vagal nerve endings lining the gut wall and contributes to intestinal motility. Every slow, full inhalation reaches beyond the lungs. It moves the gut. It touches the vagus. The body provides for multiple systems with a single motion, and does so without keeping any record of what it has given. It simply gives breath after breath and asks nothing back. What is becoming visible across these 65 facts is a picture of breath as the tool that remains when others have run out. The nervous system has many tools for managing arousal. But in the midst of acute anxiety, when reasoning is offline and the alarm is driving, breath is among the few voluntary inputs that still reach the system. You can choose it in a panic attack. You can choose it in a hospital waiting room. You can choose it at 3 a.m. when nothing else has worked. It does not require conditions. It requires only a single, deliberate exhale. Slow, controlled breathing has been incorporated into acute care medicine for contexts where physiological stability matters under pressure. Emergency departments, cardiac intensive care, surgical recovery. Research with first responders and high-stress occupational settings found that those trained in controlled breathing techniques maintained finer motor function and clearer decision-making during simulated high-pressure events compared to those without training. The mechanism is the same as in the bedroom and the meditation room. Slow breathing holds off sympathetic escalation long enough for the prefrontal cortex to stay engaged. The context changes. The breath stays the same. Sleep begins, in part, with a shift in breathing pattern. As the brain descends from wakefulness into stage 1 sleep, breathing becomes more regular and slightly slower. During deep slow-wave sleep, breathing is at its slowest and most diaphragmatic. The brain appears to follow the body's lead. Slowing the breath deliberately in the waking state moves the system toward the physiological conditions associated with the first stages of sleep. The body does not wait for sleep to slow the breath. The breath can invite the sleep. It has always worked this way. hyperventilation syndrome, a condition in which chronic overbreathing causes dizziness, tingling, chest pain, and a feeling of unreality. Affects an estimated 10 to 25% of patients presenting to physicians with these symptoms. It is frequently misidentified as cardiac or neurological disease. The primary treatment is breathing retraining. Learning to breathe slowly, through the nose, at a rate that maintains normal carbon dioxide levels in the blood. The symptoms are real and distressing, but they are not caused by a defect in the body. They are caused by the pattern of breathing, and the pattern can be changed. Research using galvanic skin response, a measure of sweat gland activity associated with sympathetic arousal, has found that slow, paced breathing reduces electrodermal activity during and after laboratory stress induction. This effect has been replicated across multiple studies and populations, including children with anxiety disorders and adults with chronic pain. The effect does not appear to depend on belief or expectation. Even individuals who do not expect breathing exercises to help show measurable physiological changes during and after the practice. The body does not require conviction. It requires the signal. The signal is the breath. The breath is tied to speech in ways that extend beyond simple air supply. Adults speaking under emotional distress, grief, anger, fear, show altered respiratory patterns that are detectable by listeners and that shape how what is said is received. Therapists trained in somatic approaches often attend more closely to a client's breathing pattern than to the words themselves. The body's report of its current state is considered more primary than its verbal account. The body is always speaking. Breath is the oldest part of its language, and the one that cannot be rehearsed. Breathing at high altitude requires physiological adaptation because the partial pressure of oxygen decreases as elevation rises. The body responds by increasing respiratory rate, which then lowers blood CO2 and creates respiratory alkalosis, causing headaches and disorientation in those who ascend too quickly. Over days to weeks, the kidneys adjust the blood's chemistry to reach a new equilibrium. What altitude physiology reveals is that the body does not wait for permission to begin adapting. It reads the environment and responds. The same intelligence that navigates mountain air manages the chemistry of an anxious night. It has always been running the calculation. Voluntary breath holding activates a cascade of physiological responses, including spleen contraction, which releases stored oxygenated red blood cells into circulation. Heart rate falls through vagal stimulation. Blood is redistributed toward the brain and heart. These responses evolved in diving mammals over millions of years and are preserved in humans, though less pronounced. The body has a built-in protocol for oxygen conservation that begins activating the moment voluntary breath cessation is detected, before oxygen levels have yet dropped significantly. The body prepares for what it senses may be coming. It always prepares before it has to. A small cluster of neurons in the lower brainstem, called the pre-Botzinger complex, appears to function as the primary rhythm generator for breathing. It produces the basic breathing rhythm even when isolated from all other brain input. Damage to this structure eliminates rhythmic breathing. It has been identified in all mammalian species studied to date. In evolutionary terms, it is ancient, older than the brain regions responsible for language, planning, emotional memory, and conscious thought. The root of your breathing is more ancient than your name, older than any word you have ever known. The research into breath and brain, taken together, points toward a conclusion that is both scientifically grounded and quietly astounding. The voluntary act of slowing your breath changes your brain. Not metaphorically, not with time delays. The amygdala quiets. The prefrontal cortex regains influence. The default mode network settles. The vagal tone increases. The heart becomes more flexible. The gut is better served. The blood chemistry shifts. All of this from the one thing the body offers you every moment, without charge, without preparation, without asking anything of you except that you use it slowly. This is the hinge of tonight. The vagus nerve is already running. The diaphragm is already moving. The parasympathetic system has always been there, not as a reward, not as something to earn, but as a system waiting for its signal. What it needs is not effort or expertise. It needs the breath. When you exhale fully and pause before the next inhale, you are not doing something new. You are finally giving the system what it has been designed to receive. The door was never locked. You have been holding the key the whole time. You are very close to something. Not an idea. A recognition. Something the body has known all along, and the mind is only now catching up to. Every exhale that has lengthened slightly during this hour, the nervous system has been receiving those messages. It has been updating its conclusion. The facts that remain carry the same science lighter. Let them arrive. Breath awareness does not require formal practice to produce benefits. Research comparing formal breath meditation with simple instructed slow breathing has found that both reduce self-reported anxiety and sympathetic tone, though longer meditation training shows larger effects over time. Even a few minutes of conscious breath slowing, without any meditation, framework, or ritual, produces measurable physiological changes. The access does not require a teacher. It does not require the right posture. It requires a few minutes and the willingness to slow down. The respiratory system is the only major organ system that answers to both involuntary and voluntary command. The heart beats without asking. Digestion runs without being directed. The immune system operates below the reach of intention. But the lungs take instruction from whoever sent the last signal, the brainstem or the cortex, and respond. This makes breath a channel that runs through the border between automatic and chosen, available at any moment to anyone who uses it. Deep breathing reduces cortisol. Studies measuring salivary cortisol following sessions of slow diaphragmatic breathing have found measurable reductions compared to control conditions. Cortisol is necessary in acute stress, but chronically elevated cortisol suppresses immune function, elevates blood sugar, impairs memory consolidation, and disrupts sleep architecture. The slow breath is not magic. It is using the access that already exists between voluntary action and automatic system. The body has always offered this. What changes is simply whether it is used. Post-traumatic stress is associated with altered respiratory function, including reduced respiratory sinus arrhythmia and lower vagal tone. Breath-based interventions, including yoga, pranayama, and resonance frequency breathing, have been studied in clinical populations with promising preliminary results. The breath does not erase what happened, but it may offer access to a physiological state that is less dominated by it. A temporary reprieve in which the body rests, even when the mind has not yet found its way there. The breath is the only autonomic function that parents instinctively offer as a calming instruction to a distressed child. Breathe, they say. Just breathe. This reflects a knowledge that precedes scientific understanding, that breath is the accessible lever, the signal the body will respond to when other interventions have run out. That knowledge has been passed down through hands placed on small backs, through the rhythm of rocking, through a quiet instruction given in the dark. The effect of breath on mood extends beyond anxiety reduction. Research has found improvements in positive affect, vitality, and sense of well-being following regular breath practice. Some of these effects may be mediated by nitric oxide production, some by changes in default mode network activity. Some may simply be the state of living, for once, in a body that has been allowed to rest. Whatever the pathway, the experience reported is consistent. Something lifts. Vagal tone, the baseline level of parasympathetic activity, responds to how a life is lived. It improves with aerobic exercise, slow, deliberate breathing, genuine social connection, and mindfulness practice. High vagal tone is associated with better cardiovascular health, more flexible emotional regulation, and faster recovery from stress. Low vagal tone is associated with inflammation, depression, and anxiety. The nervous system is not a fixed setting. It shifts toward health when health is given to it. Breath is among the most ancient documented tools of healing. Egyptian medical papyri from around 1500 BCE describe breath-based treatments. Indian Ayurvedic texts describe pranayama as foundational to both physical and mental health. Chinese medical traditions describe breathing exercises as part of the cultivation of vital energy. Greek physicians described regulated breathing for various conditions. Across these traditions, separated by millennia and geography, the same intuition appears: that breath is a lever, and that the human body can be changed by attending to its rhythm. The relationship between breath and sleep is bidirectional in the most useful sense. Good sleep improves breathing pattern and vagal tone. Good breathing improves sleep. A few nights of improved sleep make slow breathing easier. A few sessions of slow breathing before sleep make sleep better. This is a positive feedback loop that can be entered from either direction. The body spends its life looking for entry points into these sustaining loops. Breath is one of the most available ones it offers. The anterior insular cortex, most consistently associated with interoceptive awareness, including the awareness of heartbeat and breath, has been found to be more structurally developed in experienced meditators. Gray matter density is higher in this region in people with sustained breath-focused practice. The brain changes in response to what it is regularly asked to do. Paying attention to breath, repeatedly, over time, is not a passive act. It leaves a physical trace in the structure of the region most responsible for reading the body's internal state. The nasal passages are a complex, active biological system, not a simple air intake. They filter, warm, humidify, and enrich the air before passing it inward. The nasal microbiome maintains a bacterial environment hostile to common pathogens. The cilia trap particles before they reach the lungs. The mucosa produces nitric oxide. All of this happens with every breath. The nose has been doing this work for you since before you had a name. Breath can provide access to states otherwise difficult to enter voluntarily. Resonance frequency breathing induces a mild calm that practitioners describe as distinct from ordinary wakefulness. Quieter, more spacious. What breath-based practices share is the same architecture. The breath used as a lever to move the system into a different state. The lever has always been there. The only variable is how deliberately it is used. Under extreme cold, breath becomes visible vapor, a reminder that the body releases something with every exhale. Warmth, moisture, and the rhythm of its own timing all move outward into the surrounding air. The body gives continuously and does not track the accounting. This is what breath has always been. An outward movement that makes the next inward one possible. The body knows how to do this. It has always known. It is doing it right now. The science of breathwork has moved from the periphery of research into areas of serious academic and clinical interest. Journals in psychophysiology, cardiology, and neuroscience regularly publish research on breath and nervous system regulation. The Cleveland Clinic, the Mayo Clinic, and academic medical programs worldwide have integrated breath-based practices into clinical care for anxiety, chronic pain, cardiac rehabilitation, and oncology recovery. The bridge has been formally recognized. The body's own access route to its calming system is no longer being ignored by the institutions responsible for health. The body you are in has been breathing for every moment you have been alive. Through sleep and waking. Through grief and relief. It has never withheld what it knew how to do. With what you know tonight, you can meet it differently, not with effort, but with one long deliberate exhale, and the recognition that what has been waiting at the other end of that breath has always been yours. Animals under stress breathe rapidly and shallowly. Animals at rest breathe slowly from the abdomen. A sleeping cat breathes from its entire belly. A threatened cat breathes from its upper chest, ready to sprint. The body uses the breath to hold the state in place, not just to reflect it. You have been using your breath to hold a state in place too. The invitation of tonight is to change which state you are holding, and to notice that the body will follow. What stops when breathing slows is a precise list. Cortisol production slows its climb. Heart rate returns toward baseline. The amygdala releases its sustained alarm state. The production of pro-inflammatory signaling molecules decreases. These are not felt as dramatic changes. They are quiet reversals. A body that was heading in one direction choosing another. Not because it was forced, because the environment changed. The breath changed. And in the body's ongoing chemistry, that was enough. In Hebrew, the word ruach means both breath and spirit. In Sanskrit, prana means both breath and life force. In Greek, pneuma means both breath and soul. In Latin, spiritus, which becomes spirit in English, first meant breath. These are not translation accidents. They are the same intuition arrived at independently across human history. That breath is not incidental to life. It is life's most basic and continuous expression, and its most accessible teacher. When the parasympathetic system is active, the body enables digestion, immune function, cellular repair, and memory consolidation, all suppressed under sustained sympathetic dominance. The return to parasympathetic function, achievable through slow breath, is not relaxation as a luxury. It is the body reclaiming its maintenance functions. The work the body was always meant to do when the alarm is finally quiet. Every fact in this hour has described a body that is responsive. Responsive to threat. Responsive to safety. Responsive to breath. A body that changes its chemistry, its neural activity, its heart rate, in response to something as simple as a long exhale. This body has not been broken. It has been waiting for the signal. You can give it now. Underneath every anxious night, the body has been trying to return to rest. Under every breath that came too fast, there was a nervous system leaning toward the exhale that would follow. The parasympathetic system does not require the circumstances to be perfect. It does not require the mind to have resolved anything. It requires only the signal, slow breath, long exhale, a pause. The body's default direction has always been toward rest. Anxiety is a detour. It knows how to leave. Deep sleep is where the body runs its most comprehensive restoration. Growth hormone is released. Immune cells are replenished. Memories are consolidated. The brain's glymphatic system, well established in animal research and increasingly studied in humans, appears to clear metabolic waste during sleep. Full entry into deep sleep requires the nervous system to shift into parasympathetic dominance. Slow breathing before sleep facilitates this shift. What you do with your breath in the minutes before sleep is not separate from sleep. It is the doorway into it. The anxiety in your chest at the start of tonight was not a malfunction. It was a system designed to scan for danger, doing exactly what it was built to do. Tonight's science does not ask you to defeat that system. It asks you to give it better evidence. Evidence that the night is safe. That the watch can end. That the body can be trusted to breathe on its own. The vagus nerve does not require instruction. The diaphragm does not require coaching. They have been ready, every moment, to do what they were built to do. What they have been waiting for is the signal, the one that comes when you exhale all the way to the bottom of the breath and wait 1 moment before breathing in again. The body will do everything else. You have always had this. In every anxious night, in every panicked moment, in every morning when the weight returned before you were ready for it, you were 1 breath away from the system designed to hold you. Not fix you. Not save you. Hold you. The vagus nerve, the long exhale, the quieting amygdala, the settling heart. These are not achievements. They are birthright. The healing has never been outside you. It has always been as close as your next breath. Tonight's science moved through a body that has been breathing all along without knowing what that meant. Somewhere in the middle of it, you heard that the vagus nerve carries 80% of its signals upward. The body telling the brain how to feel, not the other way. You heard that every long exhale is a direct message to that nerve. Calm, ease, the watch is over. What this hour uncovered is not a technique. It is a fact about the architecture you have always lived inside. The access has always been yours. What you carry out of tonight is not a technique. It is permission, the kind the body has been waiting to receive. Perhaps this hour has carried you somewhere quieter than where you arrived. A soft like or subscribe passes that quiet along. It helps another anxious mind find its way here. Just a small gesture, 1 sleepy soul at a time. Somewhere in your chest, the vagus nerve is carrying the last message of the night upward. The message is this: the breathing has slowed. The exhale went all the way. The body has updated its conclusion. Let that update move through you now. Not as a thought, as a release. The jaw settling. The chest opening by 1 degree. Something already resting before the word rest has fully formed. Let that be enough. Let everything else follow. And now the breath continues without you. The diaphragm moves, steady and patient, without waiting to be asked. All the systems tonight's science named are settling into the frequency they were built for. You do not need to monitor them. They do not need your watching. The next video in the Relaxing Healing Facts to Fall Asleep To playlist will wait for you. There is no hurry. The science continues when you return. If your eyes have already closed, stay. Eyes closed is where the rest begins. Quiet one, the bridge is yours. It has always been yours. One breath at a time, all the way home. Good night.